All right. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining the fourth webinar in the MTW Expansion Flexibility 2 Cohort Onboarding Series. I'm Andalyn Nesbitt Rodriguez, and I'm happy to be here with you today, serving as your MC for this session. Next slide, please. So far in our onboarding series, we've heard from other MTW agencies about the benefits of being an MTW PHA. We've reviewed the steps from selection to implementation. We've introduced you to other cohort members in hopes that you will build relationships and lean on each other throughout your MTW journey. And we've really dug into the details around the MTW ACC amendment execution and around finances. Today, we're going to discuss the MTW supplement. What is it, and what will you need to complete it? We're going to talk about MTW waivers, including the definitions, the types of waivers, and how you should think about waivers in relation to the outcomes that you want to see for your programs. We're going to go through some key things to know about conducting an impact analysis. We're going to go through some hardship policy requirements. We're going to hear from an experienced MTW PHA about what you need to know and to think through in order to really get started. And lastly, we're going to discuss the public engagement process, recognizing that you've already been engaging with your community as part of the application for this cohort, but it never stops. It's a process. So we're going to go through that a bit today too. So today we're going to talk mostly about what you're going to have to do. In the next webinar on July 25th, we're going to build on this and talk about how you do these things. So in that next webinar, we're going to discuss resources that are going to help you create your MTW supplement, and we're going to discuss common MTW supplement errors and how to avoid them. But today we'll really focus on making sure that you understand what all the steps in the process are. So as usual, we have some time built in for Q&A, but also we're going to stop along to answer any questions that may come up. So remember to please input those questions into the chat box throughout the presentation so that when we get to a stopping point, we can go ahead and answer the questions that you have along the way. So you can also come off mute just by entering into the chat box that you'd like to be unmuted. And when we get to that stopping point, we'll go ahead and let you come off mute if you just want to ask your question verbally. All right. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Crystal Mills to talk about the MTW supplement.
All right. Thank you, Andalyn. And thanks to every one of you for joining us here today. So I am Crystal Mills. I am a housing innovation specialist here at the MTW office at headquarters. And I am so excited, and I feel like I talk about the MTW supplement all the time, and I'm still excited to talk with you guys today about it. The latest onboarded cohort 5 agencies, about HUD Form 50075 MTW, otherwise known as the MTW supplement to the annual PHA plan. And honestly, since we discuss this form so frequently, you'll probably notice that during this training, and even for yourselves as time progresses, you'll start referring to it as just the supplement. So that said, the supplement is what HUD requires the MTW expansion PHAs to submit with your annual PHA plans. And though there may be situations where if you're designated as a qualified PHA, like many of you, you don't submit the PHA plan annually, right? Well, rather you submit your PHA plan every 5 years if you're qualified agencies. But please advise that even if you don't submit an annual PHA plan going forward, you're still required now to submit your MTW supplement on an annual basis, which will include a few of those repeated steps, right? When preparing for your PHA plan, be the same things as you're preparing to submit your MTW supplement, including a public process. And during the next 2 webinars, we will walk through with you all the next steps that it will take to complete and submit your MTW supplement. And I'd be remiss if, before moving on to the next slide, if I didn't talk about the MTW operations notice. Because if you take nothing else away from today's webinar, please remember that expansion PHAs are governed under the required elements from the MTW operations notice. Everything that is listed as a requirement from the MTW supplement is legally bonded through the MTW operations notice. So those are 2 separate forms, 2 separate documents, but when you're seeking to determine eligibility, how to proceed, how to implement, please also refer to the MTW operations notice. So the link to the notice is down here on this slide. It will take you directly to more information about the MTW supplement in itself as well. Next slide. So what is the MTW supplement, you ask? Well, essentially, it is the web-based form that captures the reporting requirements for MTW expansion agencies by collecting information about what activities your expansion PHA proposes to undertake and the waivers that you request to be able to implement. So it will also include information about how your residents will be protected if those MTW activities create hardships, and will also provide information about the MTW agency's assessment of the impact of each of the activities that you select. MTW expansion agencies will also use the supplement to communicate your plans with residents and other interested parties in your communities through the required public process comment, which we will be talking a lot about today and in our next webinar, all about the public comment process. And we really hope that from our guest speaker, and as you're thinking about questions that asked to us at HUD today, please consider about when you think about the public process and what we mean by that, does it mean, how are you thinking about what will be best for your agency to implement? Where can you start, and how can you communicate early and often with HUD and with your residents and with your interested parties? And let's see, we can't overstate the importance of that community engagement enough to really help you build a buy-in to identify issues that may need to be addressed more clearly early on, which is also why we have specific additional requirements for the public engagement process in itself to ensure that your community is really getting engaged and is ready for the upcoming changes. So once you create the MTW supplement, you'll also be able to use this document to communicate clearly about what you're planning to do, what results you expect, how your residents will be protected, and if any of your proposed activities may have any adverse effects. And over time, we at HUD will utilize that information that we collect through the form to monitor and evaluate the MTW demonstration program as a whole, with an overarching goal to identify activities that work well and that can, if prudent, eventually be built upon in future updates to the way that HUD's programs are being operated overall. And as I mentioned, all MTW expansion agencies, including agencies who are designated as qualified agencies, that are currently exempt to the requirement to submit your annual PHA plan, you'll still need to submit the MTW supplement every year. So I just want to reiterate that, because that's a question that comes up a lot, often due to some confusion surrounding this, and sometimes we even see late submissions because of this. So for our qualified agencies on the call, per the MTW operations notice, you're not required to submit your PHA plan annually if you currently don't have to, because every 5 years you can continue to submit that every 5 years. But you will need to make sure that you submit your MTW supplement via the web-based system to HUD every year. Now, the MTW supplement is a supplement to the PHA plan. So it doesn't take the place of the PHA plan submission and should be submitted in the same exact time as your regular PHA plan would be due. So just keep in mind, the two are now married happily, and when you see one, you should see the other. I mean, I'm just kidding, but you need to just make sure that they're submitted at the same time. Here's a good point to jot down here, because I think depending on the timing in which you normally submit, you would think the 75 days. I'm not sure when you would want to submit, but you just need to keep in mind that it is still due 75 days with the PHA plan and the MTW supplement submission prior to your fiscal year beginning. What's unique about it is that the MTW supplement is a web-based form, so it's submitted online, whereas you will continue to submit your PHA plan and by the means that you normally submit it, which is typically via email directly to your field office. If there's any question about that going forward, as far as submission types and channels, just communicate that with your field office representative well in advance. And so you're just all set and ready to go when it's time comes for submission. And so the order of submission, again, should always be to submit your PHA plan and your MTW supplement at the same time. Okay, next slide, please. All right. So as I mentioned, the MTW supplement is completed as an online form. And online forms can sometimes be, a little overwhelming, can be intimidating. And you'll see here on top of intimidation, there are 10 sections that are involved with this form. But luckily, the form is designed to be helpful and guide you through the process. It uses a smart logic to take you through the screens you need to complete based on the information you input. So there'll be skip screens, so you don't need to complete certain sections that aren't applicable. There'll be drop-down menus throughout to help you select the correct options and to ensure that you have thought throughout and addressed all the required safe harbors. I'll say safe harbors, we'll talk more about those later. And then it also gives you a space within the online system to upload supporting documentations like hardship policies and impact analysis, which Andalyn mentioned earlier, and we'll talk way more in depth about those as the webinar progresses over this webinar and the next webinar as well. Today's webinar will place some heavy emphasis on Section C, MTW waivers, and Section H, public comments, due to these having such a huge impact on assisting you all in better preparing for and mastering your MTW supplement submissions. Next slide, please. All right, so you'll have some steps to undertake before you actually complete the MTW supplement. And please take heed to our suggestions at HUD when we stress that you do not need to master everything about the MTW supplement right now. For now, for the moment, you need a sense of what the MTW supplement requires, what steps you need to take to be ready to submit. And this is going to include things like taking your time to decide on what activities and waivers will work best for you all. Placing a heavy emphasis on your public process, as I mentioned, and thoroughly evaluating the impact analysis and hardship policies that may apply. Remember that understanding that the MTW supplement is and what it is and what it requires is really rooted in your agency's understanding of the MTW operations notice, okay? You'll need a sense of what it requires, and to describe your activities, your waivers, you'll need to think about how you will develop your impact analysis and hardship policies. If we say public process and public engagement, well, how will you proceed those things, right? Will you do it, and Autumn will speak more about this later, but will this be through one channel online? Will you do door-to-door? Will you do newsletters? What will that look like? And it'll take time to figure out what will best work for you all. So really going to want to take some time to have a lot of meetings with your staffs, a lot of meetings with your residents. Understand the critical steps that this will take, and really take your time and think thoroughly throughout. And just remember, you don't need to know or do everything right now, but this is why we're also here at HUD and at the field office, at headquarters and the field office to help you. So I'll say also, please take a look and refer back to this slide to help you all when you're ready to submit your MTW supplement, because we've posted several resources already onto the MTW supplement webpage. There you'll find a video here that kind of walks you through the mechanics of completing the form itself. You should watch this video as you get ready to begin completing the online form. I think it's a great preparatory step in figuring out some of the tips and tricks to keep those fresh in your mind. And also equally important is to review the reference guide. Its title here is Completing the MTW Supplement, which can also be found on the webpage, and it's linked here on the slide. And lastly, I would peruse the Housing Information Portal System training page, okay? Take a look at this. There's a ton of job aid material, modules on here, information to help you get started in using the system, including gaining access, and even a list of known issues that may help you save some time. So please click the link, save and familiarize yourself with these resources. And of course, again, I say the resources we at HUD are also resources as you need help going along. Next slide. Okay. Now let's talk about the types of waivers. All right, there are 4 different types of waivers I'm going to go over now. And to really dive in after our training, you're going to want to read through Section 4 of the MTW Operations Notice. Okay, so for the first of the 4 types of waivers, MTW waivers. So HUD has pre-vetted 17 MTW waivers permitting a range of 70 different associated activities. Those pre-vetted MTW waivers and associated activities can all be found in Appendix 1 of the MTW Operations Notice. And although the MTW waivers are pre-vetted, the PHA still need a signed approval letter from your designated HUD field office that states that both the PHA plan and the MTW supplement have been approved before you are able to actually implement any of the activities. So that letter is going to be a signed letter that comes directly from your field office. All right. The next is a safe harbor waiver, the second type of waiver. So safe harbor waivers are those additional requirements that specify like a range of flexibility available when implementing of those 70 activities associated with an MT waiver. So what I mean is they outline the requirements when the MT waiver is implemented. For example, depending on an activity, safe harbors could include things like exempting elderly and disabled households or conducting an impact analysis to determine the effects of the waiver. And when an MTW waiver has safe harbors, the MTW agency must follow them in order to implement the MTW activities without additional HUD approval. But sometimes one or more of those established safe harbor parameters may have an asterisk beside it. Anytime you see an asterisk beside a safe harbor parameter, that indicates that you cannot waive that parameter. Okay, we'll talk a little bit more about that later and show you some real live visuals to go over. And please, again, if you have any questions as we're going through this, please feel free to put those in the chat. All right, an agency specific waiver. So, MTW agencies have used the flexibilities offered under MTW to think broadly, or you should, about any problems that your communities are facing and how you're doing those things differently could help solve those problems. So there's so much that can be done inside of the MTW waivers and those activities. Though it is possible that you find that your agency needs something else to solve your local needs, okay? And if that's the case, and there's something, an activity that you feel would be prudent, would be helpful to solve one of your local needs, but it isn't identified, it can't be resolved by using any MTW waiver, it can't be resolved by going outside of the requirements from the operations notice, anything referenced in the operations notice, then that would be something that's considered specific to your agency, and thus an agency specific waiver would be requested by HUD. So again, wouldn't be related, go beyond the pre-vetted MTW waivers, and it would propose a new and innovative activity that would help your agency to meet your specific local need. It's important that when you're assessing and ultimately proposing any possible solutions for your local needs, that an MTW agency specific waiver can only be used to waive the 1937 Act and implementing regulations. Okay, which again, has to first be proposed by your agencies and approved by HUD in writing. But I'll stress this many times. That process is a process that sometimes takes time. We at HUD certainly recommend that you start with the MTW waivers. And there's a lot that you can do within the 17 MTW waivers, and focus on those in the first year will help you get off to a strong start. Later on, if and when you choose to pursue an agency-specific waiver or safe harbor waiver, you want to be very thorough in the waiver description and include appropriate citations. Doing so will help to ensure less delays in the review process. And finally, there's the cohort-specific waivers. Okay, so as a part of MTW expansion, HUD is studying specific policy changes, also using cohort-specific waivers. So I will say this isn't really applicable for your cohort. Only cohorts 2, 3, and 4 have cohort-specific waivers, and cohort 1 didn't. And so you also don't have any cohort-specific waivers that we're looking for as far as for the MTW flexibilities. Just how they work in general for PHAs is what we're concentrating and wanting to learn more about. So we recommend, again, start with the 17 MTW waivers, focusing on that your first year. Later on, if you choose, then potentially pursue the safe harbor waivers, agency specific waivers. And also, before we move on to the next slide, you'll find here at the bottom on this current slide is another spectacular resource that we made available, is the MTW online manual. It's located on HUD Exchange. There lives a whole section explaining the types of waivers and the requirements. And here again, for your convenience, it's just right there at the bottom of the slide. We pasted to both of those resources for you for the reference as you get started. Next slide, sorry. All right, now let's take a look at the elements of these MTW waivers. So the format here is the same that you'll find on all MTW waivers and Appendix 1 of the MTW Operations Notice. Also, this is also spelled out in the PHA online training manual, linked here at the bottom. So the elements of the waiver in either of those locations includes, you see, waiver name and description, which details the authorization provided to the MTW agency, subject to the terms of the MTW Operations Notice. Next is the statutes and the regulations that may be waived to allow the MTW agency to implement those associated activities. Then you'll see the list of permissible activities, which are organized by program type. So by that, I mean the activity is either being proposed for implementation under the public housing and or a housing choice voucher HCV, or both, should the PHA select to do so. Okay. And then finally, the safe harbors. All right. And these are those additional requirements beyond those specified in the MTW activity description up top. Okay, that you all will have to adhere to and implement in order to gain HUD approval and for your implementation. Next slide. All right, so here is the massive listing of the MTW waivers, and perhaps it doesn't appear so on the screen, like massive is absurd, but this, you'll see this is 17 categories that actually offers an expansion PHAs over 70 different potential activities that can be used with your designation. So we still recommend that you begin with waivers that will be easy to implement and that we've seen other new agencies use. You know, we kind of wanted to go over some commonly used ones here. But these are the 17 here. You'll see here on the link, there's also a link with HUD Exchange that takes a deeper dive into those waivers. But if we'd like to just right now go through some of those waivers with you. So you have waiver 1, they're all tenant rent policies. Waiver 2, you list the payment standards and rent reasonableness. Waiver 3 lists reexamination waivers. These categories are among the most popular waivers we see agency using. And in the next slide, we'll review some of these waivers. And again, this isn't to promote that you do everything at once or even that you select these, but we just kind of want to spend some time here and show you what some of the more commonly used ones were. Next slide, please. All right. So MTW agencies can adopt and implement policies for setting tenant rent, including, this is elimination of deductions, okay? And with this, for example, for elimination of deductions, it allows for the flexibility to eliminate one or some of many deductions. And so with this, an example would be if you wanted to select this to be more flexible in response to your community's local need, this is one of the more commonly used ones. And as you see here, the slide shows the specific statutes and regulations that will be waived with each of these waivers, as well as the required task that must be completed prior to implementing the waiver type. And then pays special attention also here in the safe harbor section, where it says that you must conduct an impact analysis, where in order to implement this, that means that you also will need to exempt the elderly and disabled families from the rent policy. And the agency will also need to implement a hardship policy. So we're going to go deeper, going further into the webinar. We'll take a deeper dive into the impact analysis and hardship policies a bit later. Again, I know I've said it before, but it's important when you're taking a look at the waiver requests and the formatting. You see here in Roman numeral I for the safe harbor parameter says the agency must conduct an impact analysis. Okay, an agency must exempt elderly and disabled families. And an asterisk is beside the first two, also besides the third one. Agency must implement a hardship policy. When there's an asterisk, it indicates that that cannot be waived. The safe harbor parameter cannot be waived. So as you're going through Appendix 1, as you're going through each of the MTW waivers, please make sure that that's something that you're on the lookout for. Next slide. All right. Another waiver that helps our expansion PHAs respond to some specific local needs is the standard deduction waivers. Respectfully, I say using this waiver can replace existing deductions with a single standard deduction. So this could easily improve processes by simplifying administrative procedures, saving staff time and cost. So for these waivers, you'll see for your safe harbor waiver requirements, you also need to conduct an impact analysis. And also you see the agency must implement a hardship policy. So asterisk again indicates that it cannot be waived. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so with the ever increasing cost of living, increased rents, right? Choosing a payment standard based upon small area FMR rents could benefit households. All right, so the small area FMR payment standard waiver allows the PHA to choose payment standards that are between 80% and 150% of small area FMR. So again, you're gonna make sure that you're taking a look at the activity description when you're actually filling out your MTW supplement submission online and it's asking for your narrative. As a best practice, include the description and as much detail in how you plan on implementing your activity. Take a look over at the safe harbor parameters. You see Roman numeral 1 states payment standards must be between 80% and 150% of the small area FMR. So be very specific in how and what percentage you are seeking to implement. What timeline, when you anticipate beginning this activity. It also says for Roman numeral 2, right? The payment standard in effect for each group zip code area must be within the basic range of the small area FMR for each zip code area in the group. Be able to support that information and documentation. Agency must implement an impact analysis, and the agency must also, again, implement a hardship policy. So you'll see Roman numerals 2, 3, and 4 require this as requirements due via the asterisk. However, the first one, payment standard must be between 80% and 150%, does not have an asterisk. That is indicative that there could be a possibility for an agency to submit a safe harbor waiver. However, that as it stands without a safe harbor waiver approval, these are the requirements and elements that you must stay within. Next slide, please. All right. All right, 2B, payment standards, fair market rents. So here a PHA is authorized to adopt and implement a reasonable policy to establish payment standards based upon fair market rents waiver, okay? So to address safe harbor waiver requirements for this, you as a PHA must ensure that the payment standard is between 80% and 120% of the fair market rent. Also, again, an impact analysis is required, as is a hardship policy. And so we do that so that way, you know, when needed, if applicable, the hardship policy request will be available for residents. Next slide, please. All right. So last example for the MTW waivers without a safe harbor waiver. Okay. So in this one, this is very commonly requested, alternative re-exam schedule for households. So using waivers 3A and 3B, I'd say 3A is for, you see PH beside it, public housing. 3B, HCV, allow expansion MTW PHAs to establish alternative re-exams for households. There's another example of a waiver that can help MTW PHAs with time, cost saving, flexibilities. And again, over here to the right, to meet safe harbor requirements for this waiver, says MTW PHAs must ensure that re-exams must occur at least every 3 years. Additionally, the agency must at least allow at least one interim adjustment per year at the request of the household. And that's if the household gross income has decreased 10% or more. It says agency must implement an impact analysis and a hardship policy. And you'll see with many of the rent reform activities that an impact analysis and hardship policy are mostly always required. Next slide. Okay, so here's another example of how those MTW activity descriptions appear in Appendix 1 of the operations notice. In fact, this is a snippet of the operations notice in Appendix 1, okay? But in this example, I want to show you how HUD would determine that a safe harbor waiver would be needed to be required if in order for a PHA to proceed. Say that we are reviewing your MTW supplement, and within your narrative, we see something that indicates it. So in this case, we're looking at the minimum rent activity, which allows for the expansion for the PHA to set a waiver of the minimum rent rules, okay? By allowing the PHA to establish a minimum rent higher than what is currently allowed for non-MTW expansion PHAs, but not to exceed $130 per month. How do I know that? Because it's down there in the safe harbor waiver section. It says Roman numeral 1, minimum rent must not exceed $130 per month. So let's walk through this format together, and you'll see first waiver name is listed, minimum rent. Notice again in parentheses, 1E is for public housing, 1F is for HCV. Be mindful of that as you're going through your MTW supplement. I mentioned that there's drop downs. That's one of the drop down options, is for you to select which one. Then again, in this, goes over the statutes and regulations that are applicable as far as what is being waived. And then in the last section, it lists out these 4 specific parameters. So with this, in Roman numeral 1, let's say as we're reading your narrative, we see that the rent policy must not exceed $130 per month. And then 2 states that it must exclude the elderly and disabled from this rent policy. And then, of course, you'll see heavy emphasis, red bold circle, must conduct the impact analysis and hardship policy. And that has 2 asterisks beside it, which indicates what? There's no waiving that requirement. However, in the first parameter, minimum rent must not exceed $130 per month. So let's say you actually want to proceed $140 per month. Well, that request would fall outside of the parameter. So therefore, your PHA would need to request a safe harbor waiver. So by definition, that is how this is defined. If it's going outside of the safe harbor parameter, hence that's when a safe harbor waiver is born, okay? So you would submit your safe harbor waiver request via the web-based form, and the requirements in submitting a safe harbor waiver request are spelled out in the MTW operations notice, okay? So again, make sure that you take heed to the MTW operations notice and those requirements. And so again, for now, the key thing to remember is watch out for those asterisks. Please do try to stay within the means of the 70 activities and see what you can do there first. And then if you find that it will not help to really resolve what your agency is needing to better and advance in the way that you need, then you may want to then at that point think about looking outside of those parameters. Next slide, please. Okay. So some key takeaways here. We talked about what the MTW supplement is, the section of the MTW supplement, that it will be submitted via web-based form, and that MTW agencies may implement activities associated with any MTW waiver that is contained in Appendix 1 of the operations notice without further HUD approval once a few things are done, right? Okay, the first thing, I think you heard some of these before, but firstly, your ACC is fully executed by HUD. All right. And then secondly, the activity must be included into MTW supplement to the PHA plan, and that MTW supplement must be approved by your HUD field office, okay? Signed approval letter back to your PHA will then grant you the authority to move forward in implementing those activities as you stated in your MTW supplement submission. Third, the MTW agency must update your ACOP and admin plan as applicable to be consistent with the MTW activities and any related waivers, okay? And lastly, your agency must ensure that the activities will be implemented within the associated safe harbors unless you've requested and received an approval for either a safe harbor waiver or an agency-specific waiver. Again, for those safe harbors, MTW agencies are responsible. You're responsible for ensuring that the safe harbors listed in the ops notice are followed unless the agency, requests and is granted a safe harbor waiver. So please make sure that, everything is noted in your supplement notice in your ACOP and admin plan and implemented accordingly. And then again, I will say, inform from our experience over the last few years, we found that it's better for agencies to wait before applying to do a safe harbor waiver or an agency specific waiver. Instead, we recommend you become more familiar with being an MTW agency, through selecting some of those existing pre-vetted MTW waivers first. And remember that there's so much that you can do with the MTW waivers. And honestly, the review process is just so much quicker too. So I believe that, I'm way ahead of time. Okay, let me pause here for some questions.
Absolutely. And
Okay.
I don't see any questions in the chat yet. So again, I want to encourage you to put those questions into the chat along and along. We'll have a few breaks like this in order to answer any questions. If you'd like to ask your question verbally, then you can either put that in the chat or you can just unmute at this point and ask any questions that you might have. So we'll give folks a moment to ask questions in the chat or to come off mute and ask questions verbally. And while we're doing that, let's do a poll question. Let's go to poll question number 1. And you should see a pop up on your screen with this poll question that's going to come up in just a moment. And the question is, it's a true or false question. Because MTW waivers are pre-approved in the MTW operations notice, MTW agencies may begin implementing them as soon as HUD executes the ACC amendment. Is that true or false? Okay, we see some answers coming in. Thank you. I'm going to give it just another minute. Please do participate. We want this to be an active, interactive training and make sure that we are answering any questions you have and make sure that everything is clear. So just for another, okay, looks like the poll may have closed. All right, so yeah, the majority of you got that absolutely correct. The answer is false. The ACC amendment marks the formal entry into the MTW program, but the agency can't implement activities that require MTW waivers until those waivers have been listed in the MTW supplement to the PHA plan and the field office has been approved, has approved it. So this is why that supplement is so important. It's the act of including the waiver and the activities in the MTW supplement and getting field office approval for those that lets you get started with the MTW activities that I know you're anxious to get going on. All right, so thank you so much. We're going to go ahead. I still don't see any questions in the chat. Okay, so at this time, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Autumn. Autumn's going to talk a little bit about the impact analysis. Autumn?
All right. My name is Autumn Gold, and I'm with the MTW team. I'm sorry, I've been having troubles with my camera for the last couple of days, so I am just going to take it from here. We want to talk about some key things to know about the impact analysis. As you heard earlier, we talked about the minimum rent waiver. The safe harbors included that the PHA must do an impact analysis. To start off, what is an impact analysis and how would we want to do one? It's a chance to think systematically about the benefits that you expect to see from any activity or waiver and the potential consequences or hardships the activity may bring. As agencies get ready to start on new activities, it's imperative to think through things systematically. Key things to know about an impact analysis. It's not required annually for every activity, but it is required annually for some activities. And we'll discuss more about that shortly here. When it's required, you can decide how to approach it. HUD does not specify how you have to do an impact analysis. You can be creative, but saying there is no impact doesn't fly. So we do want you to take into consideration the different aspects of the impact analysis. A single impact analysis can be done in a way that encompasses multiple activities related to just one initiative. If an activity is added to a larger initiative, the impact analysis may need to be repeated if adding the activity constitutes a substantial change. When an impact analysis is required, as noted by the asterisk in the safe harbor sections of their operations notice, as Crystal pointed out, an impact analysis cannot be waived. As you decide how to go about an impact analysis, keep in mind that there are questions we've been discussing. You can bring a large range of people to the table early and often to help us support the planning and implementation of the activities. Think about the insights you can get from your staff, your residents, your families, the public, about the impacts that maybe you haven't thought about up until this point. Then consider the value of knowing what impacts others might anticipate, something you might have not thought of. If they are right about the issues and they bring it up to you that you didn't foresee, you may need to mitigate potential problems or consequences and account for additional upsides. If people have misconceptions, you may need to explain things more clearly or in a different way. Sharing your analysis of the impact that you anticipate and showing evidence can help people accept the change more easily, because change is hard for everybody. So it's really important to hear them out, to address their concerns, and talk about the positives that the activity will have. There may be backslash, it's common, surprises, nobody likes surprises. So it's important to involve staff, families, residents, the community in the impact analysis process to avoid these surprises. Helpful impact analysis information can be found in the operations notice appendix 2, which is linked in this slide. Next slide, please. Great. Impact analysis. Let's see. Factors that need to be assessed and considered when doing an impact analysis. The MTW operations outlines 9 factors that must be assessed and considered when developing the impact analysis. And it's very important here to address all 9 and not skip over them, even if you don't think that they apply. The agency's finances, the affordability and cost of housing, the agency's wait list, your termination of families, your public housing occupancy, your utilization rate, meeting those statutory objectives, meeting the statutory requirements, and the hardship requests and number of that have been granted or denied. So you want to go through each one of these and address it when a impact analysis is required. The the operations notice outlines these 9 factors. Keep in mind that this must be done before implementation, and I would say even before going to your public hearing. Bring to them what you've thought through, and then they can share with you what they think. You want your program to be fair and equal and take all things into consideration. So when there's some differences or an impact in finances, an impact on time, an impact on a family, I will also point out at this point that we don't prescribe how you should do an impact analysis, but bringing quantitative data and historical information to prove your point is very valuable here. Sometimes there won't be an impact on certain factors, like I said before. For example, changing the frequency of HQS inspections likely won't have an effect on the affordability that affect your families, but you still need to consider each of the factors individually and assess whether there could be an impact. If you conclude there won't be an impact, definitely document that. Here are some things that I went through above. Again, the finances. So if you're doing, the impact could be a positive impact too. So if you're going to do less frequent HQS inspections, financially, you can say this is going to save our agency this much more money. And by saving this much more money, we can serve this many more families. You want to consider whether changes you are implementing have an impact on the family's ability to afford their rent. So if there is a negative impact on the family, we will talk later about the hardship policies that you want to put in place to protect your families. For the wait list, consider how certain changes will affect how long residents will remain on the wait list. We want to see if it's going to help families move in quicker, or is it going to make families stay on the wait list longer? Your termination rate, you should have that information already when you're doing your two-year tool. Consider terminations are likely to increase or decrease the result of your activity and what magnitude those changes will be. Remember that goals are in cost effectiveness, self-sufficiency, and housing choice are the MTW statutory goals that you must meet, and the agency's ability to meet the 5 MTW statutory requirements, serving very low income, reasonable rent policies, substantially the same. Are you able to serve the same number of families or more, or is something you're doing going to decrease that number? You want to take that into consideration, your comparable mix of families and your housing quality standards. The rate of hardship requests and the number granted and denied after you've implemented an activity, we ask that you track, how many hardship requests did you get, how many did you approve, how many did you deny, and why. Okay. Let's go to the insight and resources regarding an impact analysis. MTW agencies from earlier cohorts have shared with us a lot of questions about the impact analysis, including about why they are important and about how to implement them. So we're going to share some of those with you today. Here are some pearls of wisdom from our experience with MTW agencies that have gone through this already. We can't say it often enough, but don't try to do too much at once. Really, I know Crystal said that. We're going to always say that. Choose a few activities, think them through, and assess their likely impacts carefully. Really engage interested parties and use their input to inform your impact analysis. It's hard to foresee all the likely impacts. Having more people with different perspectives, think about the activity and help ensure you look at it from all angles and consider many of the possibility of the impacts as you can. And finally, the whole point of the activities to have an impact. Use the impact analysis to help you think through who the activity will impact and in what ways will the activity impact them. There are a few helpful resources, specific requirements for conducting an impact analysis and creating hardship policies are provided in Appendix 2 of your operations notice. Bookmark it, get used to it, go through it with your staff. It also talks about impacts and what to look for. It walks you through how to think about each of the other 8 factors. It also walks you through the impact analysis and hardship policies. So there is a webinar from October 2021 with corresponding slides are also linked on this slide that we recommend that you go back and watch that. It's very, very helpful. the webinars on how to approach an impact analysis training, and the requirements of the op notice. The links in the hyperlinks in the slide are very valuable resources. And I will hand it over to Andolyn for a few minutes.
All right. Thank you so much, Autumn. Okay, we do have a question in the chat from Jill. Thank you so much, Jill, for this excellent question. The question is, if our PHA is in a small area fair market rent mandatory jurisdiction, I'm assuming we can apply for the waiver of the payment standard between 80 and 150% of small area fair market rent without having to do an impact analysis or having a hardship policy. Is that correct? And fortunately, today we have with us Tanisha Gurdon, who is with the MTW office, and she's actually the small area fair market rent subject matter expert. So Tanisha, can you answer that question for us?
Yes, I can. So the answer is no, you would still have to have those, the impact analysis and the hardship policy. And also, if you are in a small area FMR area, a mandatory area, you need to tell us that you want an exemption and that you want to use your MTW flexibility in lieu of the mandatory small FMRs. But the bottom line is, I dropped in the chat the links to the requirements for the small area FMRs. If you are going to do the mandatory small area FMRs, you need to follow the guidance in those notices. And if you are going to use your MTW flexibility, you need to let us know and also follow whatever requirements are in the operations notice.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tanisha. And thank you again, Jill, for that question. I'm going to encourage you again to please put your questions into the chat box along and along. We'll be stopping again shortly here and want to make sure that we answer any questions that you may have. All right, I'm going to turn it back over to Autumn now, who's going to go through hardship policies, a little information there.
All right. So before I start on hardship policies, remember the asterisk means it absolutely cannot be waived. So if it has an asterisk, you must do it. Okay, let's talk about key things for hardship policies. Each MTW agency must adopt a written hardship policy, and the safe harbor section of the MTW waivers require, if the safe harbor section requires a hardship policy. The operations notice, Appendix 2, page 66, provides specific requirements related to the hardship policies. Let me note here that if we are seeing some hardship policies that just repeat what the ops notice says, really without fleshing it out, the policy for your particular activity. So just copying and pasting from the ops notice does not meet the required element of the hardship policy. You need to make sure that the policies really speak to the hardships that residents may encounter because of the specific MTW activity. A clear hardship policy will help your agency be consistent in determining when requirements or provisions of the MTW activity creates a financial or other hardship for your family. You can use a single hardship policy for multiple activities or develop different hardship policies for different MTW activities. And so when you upload those to the HIP system, make sure that you say hardship policy, and this applies to these activities, but whether it be multiple or single, make it clear what activities the hardship policy is applied to. In either case, make sure that the policy is clear and easy to understand, and that the families know when and how to access it. So it's going to want to be in your policies, your admin, in your ACOP. You may want to explain it to them during your briefing. And also be sure to review the hardship policy and policies with your residents during recertifications. Just remind them what their options are if they experience a hardship in when you have applied a MTW activity. All right. Some more things you need to know about the hardship policies. the hardship policy is required, and you want to ensure that that it outlines the agency's, I'm sorry, how it outlines the agency will immediately provide an exemption for the MTW activity at a reasonable level and duration if it is found to cause hardships on the family. So when will you, how often will you need to include the grievance procedures, spelling those things out, requesting for a second level review of denied hardship requests. So if somebody requests a hardship policy, it's denied, you want to make sure in your hardship policy you offer that second level of review. You will also need your hardship policy, to be an attachment of your MTW supplement to the PHA plan. You want your hardship policy and your impact analysis to be a separate attachment that you upload into the HIP system. Once approved, the policies must be included in the ACOP and the admin plan, as I mentioned before. We will go over what makes a good hardship policy in our next training on July 25th. So we'll go into more details. We're just kind of keeping it high level here. And then there are a lot of resources. Specific requirements for creating a hardship policy are provided in Appendix 2 of the operations notice. Do you see the pattern here? You want to get to know your operations notice. Mine is printed and on my desktop. I make notes and I refer to it every day. There's lots of agencies that ask for a sample. There is a sample policy in the MTW expansion online training manual at the hardship policy and process requirements section. There's a link to the sample in the slide above, and we recommend that you go through that. You know, you can also either ask your field office point of contact if you feel like you need some help or support, but using quantitative data, fair policies, you know, just making sure that if something you've applied causes any kind of hardship, you want to give them the opportunity to be able to access your MTW activities without that hardship. And now I'm going to hand it back over to Andelin.
All right, thank you so much. We don't have any questions in the chat at this time, so we're just going to go on and take a break here, let everybody stretch and get some water. We'll take a 10-minute break, and when we come back, we're going to have some expert insights from an MTW agency that's been here and done this before and has some really great things to share. So we'll take a 10-minute break and meet everyone back here at 3:11. Thank you. All right, welcome back, everybody. It's 3:11, so we're going to come on back from the break now, and we're going to, as promised, hear from our experts here, an MTW agency that has been doing this work and is here to share some really good experiences and advice with you. So we have Lisa Porter and Diana Carter here from Bristol, Virginia Redevelopment and Housing Authority, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Lisa now. Lisa, welcome.
Thank you, and we are so honored that you've asked us to participate and be part of this webinar. So next slide, please. Just want to tell you a little bit about who we are, where we're located, and why MTW was important to us. So we are a cohort number 1 of the expansion agencies. We've been doing this a little over 3 years. We're located in the Appalachian Mountains of Southwest Virginia. When a lot of people think of Virginia, they think of Northern Virginia and DC. But we are just the opposite. We are, if you look at Virginia as a boot, we are the toe. If you look at it as a dragon, we are the eye. But we are down next to the Tennessee line. We are the second oldest housing authority in Virginia. We were established in 1938 and recently celebrated 85 years. And that means that we also have very old housing stock. We have units that date back to the 1940s. And we are in the process of repositioning most of our public housing stock and considering RAD and things of that nature. And so MTW to us was desirable because of the financial flexibility that it would give us as we were looking at repositioning. You can see our current size there. We have housing choice vouchers, we have tax credits, public housing, and a few market rate units, and they all total close to 800 units. We do have a fair cloth limit of 119 that we're also looking at as we look at the flexibilities that we want to use. And we have around 30 staff members. Next slide, please. So how did we start? How did we begin to sell the concept of moving to work to our community partners and interested parties? One thing is we were especially challenged in this area because it was during COVID. And so we had to try to have those meetings at a time when it was almost impossible to have meetings. So we got very creative. We were fortunate in that we always have had large tentacles out in the community. And we in Bristol are fortunate to have a lot of resources and a lot of community partners who work with us, and that made it much easier. We had our resident meetings, our resident advisory board meetings, and just community-wide meetings. And although we could do some of this in person, at the time, a lot of folks were still afraid to come out. And so we had virtual meetings as well. However, a lot of our clients aren't familiar with doing virtual meetings, especially 3 years ago when they weren't nearly as popular as they are now. And so we thought, how can we provide access to our clients and to the community members who aren't comfortable with virtual meetings? And so we did a series of community conference calls. We would actually put the speakerphone in the middle of the boardroom, and we would have conference calls at different times of the day to allow for different work schedules. We also engaged with social media. We have an electronic newsletter. And one thing that we find very valuable is we have a monthly meeting of coalition members. And this has been going on for 25 years or more. And those are community partners who come together once a month, not to do anything other than to share what they're doing, what's available, what are they doing with their clients. And they also have a speaker that month who talks about their program in depth. And at least once a year, we are that speaker. And so we've used that opportunity to spread the word through the coalition. Next slide, please. We also found that resident services was a key for us. When we talked about moving to work with our residents, there was a fear. And the number one fear was in the title of the program, Moving to Work, which I think is a misnomer. And so we would get the question all the time of, what does it mean? Does it mean I have to go to work, even if I'm elderly or disabled, or even if I'm a primary caregiver? Do I have to go to work? And does it change how many hours I have to work? Or, what does this mean to me? And once they understood that it was more about what we could do as a community to serve local needs and to better have better efficiencies and to serve them better, then I think that alleviated that fear. And we relied heavily on our resident services department to help to educate and to address those concerns. And we're very fortunate to have an Envision Center, and they were a big part of helping to educate with that. Next slide, please. So how did we create buy-in with our staff? Because you have to sell it to your staff too. They have to believe in the program. They have to know what that program is going to do for them and what it's going to do for their clients. So the one thing we chose to do that I thought was very important was to meet off-site with our staff. I think it changed the energy of the meeting, but it also sent a message that this is important, this is different, and I really need your attention with this. And so we related the concept to our current situation. We had just done a master plan, and we went through the parts of that plan that told what our mission is, what our vision is, what our challenges are, and how MTW can help us to meet those challenges. And I had just gotten back from a trip to Disney World, where I rode Expedition Everest. I'm not a roller coaster rider. I'm scared to death of them, but I went. And so I related what this adventure is going to be to what that roller coaster ride was. And we showed a YouTube video of the roller coaster ride, which comes to an abrupt halt because the tracks are broken, and then it goes in reverse. And so the message was, we may come to a stop. We may have to go backward. We may go forward at a rapid rate. We may be scared to death, but we're in this together, and it's going to come to a good end. And so you can see me there on the roller coaster. We also focused on the pillars of MTW, to improve efficiency, to have better cost effectiveness, to enhance customer service, help with self-sufficiency, and provide greater housing choice. And those were the 4 things that we concentrated on when we wanted to pick out what our initial waivers would be as well. Next slide, please. So how did we choose our waivers? I think earlier when you were listening and they said, don't do too much at once, that was great advice. And that's how we chose to approach it as well. We went for the low-hanging fruit. We wanted to start small and build, not do too much that was overwhelming. We also thought that if we chose too many waivers at once, we wouldn't be able to tell what the impact was of any particular waiver. It would all be jumbled up together. And we also wanted to choose what were priorities for us. Diana and I have both been in this business for over 3 decades. And during that time, I know we've both had moments when we thought, why do we have to do it this way? This doesn't work. I just don't agree with this or that. And so this was our chance to think back over all the things that we were frustrated about and what could we make a difference and what could we change. So what had been on our decades-old wish list and what could help our staff to function more effectively. Diana, I'm going to turn it over to you here because I know you, Diana was our MTW coordinator during all this, and she was the one who actually did the supplement and the work on the hardships and the policies. So if you could share a little bit about what you went through.
So I'm also like Lisa, I cannot encourage you enough to go for your low-hanging fruit and start small, because even some of what you may consider to be an easy waiver, an easy thing to do, as we begin our implementation, we would run into road bumps that we didn't even think about. So along the line, we have learned and had to change our course a little bit or back up and decide on methods that we needed to think about, such as in our voucher program, where we went to the 120% payment standard and the 3-year certifications. We didn't anticipate landlord increases on the annual basis. So we had to kind of back up and think about how we were going to approach and implement that. The hardship policy, what we decided to do was one single policy for several reasons. We thought that that would make it much more achievable for our staff to handle and much more understandable for our residents. Because if you have a lot of different hardship policies, I think it kind of gets convoluted a little bit and it gets more complicated than it needs to be. So our hardship policy is encompassing. And basically, in a nutshell, what we did was anything that would negatively impact a resident, that they felt they were being punished or had their rent was too high or whatever, they could request a hardship. We would review it. If they met the criteria that we had established, then what we decided to do is take them back to the original way that we're all used to, all the current HUD policies that we do without MTW abilities. So that kept it easier for our staff to implement, and I think it's made it easier on our residents to understand. And I think to date, Lisa can correct me, I think we've just recently had a hardship request for a review, but we've gone this long without anyone feeling that it was negatively impacting them, which I think is just astronomical. I think that's great. The impact analysis, when we first did it, what we used is information in our current software program. We also did some interviews with our clients, with our staff, and with the community to get their input on how they felt certain waivers may affect them. And we used and pulled information from the PIC system. So that was kind of the basis of how we went about establishing what we thought the impact analysis would be. We are now just in a point, it took longer than we expected to implement the waivers. So we are just now in a position where we are going to start evaluating what we feel the actual impact has been on the different waivers. So we're excited to see where that leads us. So as Lisa said, it's an ongoing, growing thing.
Next slide, please. I think we've gotten into that one a little bit. Diana, do you want to speak to any of these here?
I'll let you I'll tell you the first one, the self-sufficiency impacts. We really had to back up and think about how the policies would affect our families that were participating in our self-sufficiency program. A lot of the policies we used helped everyone else by pushing out increases in income. But as you know, with your self-sufficiency families, they rely on increases in their income to save and escrow monies. So that wasn't always a benefit to them. So we backed up and gave them more flexibility in being able to opt out of some of the MTW activities so that it would better benefit their families.
And I think that moving forward, we're going to change how the self-sufficiency clients can escrow using an MTW flexibility.
Yes.
One of the big things we ran into was software capacity. And so we had to make a software change right at the beginning because our current software provider could not give us what we needed to make the waivers work. So that was a heavy lift right at the beginning of MTW. We did run into some 558 issues, and that means that we weren't able to submit sometimes. And so our rates have gone down, our submission rates have gone down. I'm hopeful that HIP is going to help us fix that once they roll out the 558 form for MTW flexibility agencies. I'm looking forward to that. And we did know that some of the changes were going to impact our finances, but we were still surprised at the degree to which we started to see a rise in our per unit cost on HAP and decrease in rental income in public housing. It was a little bit of a shock. So we're going to take a look at how that has impacted our agency. We'll be doing that very soon. And just one thing I wanted to mention too, for us, there was a economic development going on in our community. We have the first casino in Virginia here in Bristol, and so that had a big impact on our market right at the time we began MTW. And that's one reason that the 120% payment standard was just so important to us, because it allowed us to keep up with the market. Next slide, please. And these are just some tidbits of advice. We found it was important to talk to our peers. There were a couple of housing authorities who were also in Cohort 1 that we partnered with in the beginning, and we would have Zoom calls together, and we would actually include our staff, and then we would break out into rooms so that, the finance people could talk together, the occupancy people could talk together, the MTW coordinators could get together. And that was really helpful. To hear what other people were doing, how they were approaching it, and just to know that you weren't alone in that boat. I think it's important to do research, and the MTW Collaborative has been really helpful in that regard, because you get to see what other housing authorities are doing and how they're using their waivers. Because I think in the beginning, it was almost like a dog chasing a car, and when you caught it, what do you do with it? And so, you hear about all these great things that you can do with MTW flexibilities, but it was almost overwhelming, like, I'm supposed to be very creative with this. What am I not doing that I should be doing? I think we all sort of felt that way in the beginning. So just do some research, see what's out there, what will work for you, what will work for your community, and trust your instincts, trust yourself. We did have a little shock with the financial impacts just because of the changes that had to be made to the ledger and how it had to be reported in FDS. But we've got a really good finance team, and they were able to take care of that. And just know that, it's a little bit scary. It's change, it's different, but it's a great opportunity. And this is the best thing for your agency and your clients. Any parting words from you, Diana?
I just want to very briefly say something about the supplement itself. One of the big things that was helpful for us is we looked through the supplement and we mimicked a Word document based on what the supplement asked for. And then we were able to cut and paste our answers straight into the supplement. And that was such a help in us making sure that we had accurate information in the right places in the supplement. So I would recommend doing that.
We were very fortunate to have Diana as the coordinator of MTW before she retired, because she is such a stickler for detail. And if you have a detail-oriented person, I would encourage you to use them for the MTW supplement. Next slide, please. And here's our contact information. And if you need anything, just let us know. We're happy to help in any way. And good luck. It's going to be great. Hope to see you at some of the meetings.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much, Lisa and Diana, for being here and for sharing that experience and the advice. We do have a question for you. Someone asked, will you be willing or able to share what software you were using and which you transitioned to?
We were using a version of TinMast, and we transitioned over to Yardi.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And Amanda, thank you so much for putting that into the chat. If you have any other questions for Lisa or Diana, then please feel free to put those into the chat, or just come off mute so that we can make sure we address all of your questions. So I'm sure that you're excited about your MTW designation. This presentation so far has probably caused a lot of thoughts to float around in your mind about how to get started. The MTW supplement is going to ask you for a variety of information about what you plan to do with your designation and what you want your impact to be. So what are your plans and goals? Who's your target population? What waivers do you need? Do you need an impact analysis, or do you have hardship policies in place? So at this time, I want to pull up poll question number 4, if you will, and we're going to assess how far along in this process you are. So if we can pull up poll question number 4, how far along are you in your thinking about what you need to get started? And I hope that everyone will participate and try to answer this question. So have you identified all of your first year waivers so far? Have you identified plans for the year, desired impact and goals, but not yet the waivers that you're going to need? Or do you still need to think further on plans, impacts and goals first before you put those things into writing? And I see folks are participating, and I appreciate that. We're going to wait a few more minutes. We've got about half the room that has not yet participated. So please do jump on and answer this poll question for us. How far along are you in your thinking about what you need to do to get started? Have you identified all of your first year waivers yet? Have you identified your plans and the desired impacts and goals, but not yet the waivers? Or do you still just need to do some more thinking in general before you get started on those? All right. Well, thank you to everyone that answered the poll. We're going to go ahead and close the poll now. And I see there are some they're kind of spread out. So some folks answered A, some folks answered B, and some folks answered C. And so if you answered A, that is wonderful. You've already identified your first year waivers, gotten really far in your thinking. Do remember that you'll still want to make sure that you fully thought through the early questions. So what's going to be covered next, and also iron out the details about what households are going to be affected, what needs to be done in relation to the impact analysis, hardship policies, etc. For those of you that answered B, that maybe have identified your plans and your desired impact and goals, but haven't yet identified those waivers that you need, you're on the right track. So now you just need to figure out your waivers and go from there based on the key questions that are going to be coming up right after this. Okay, for those that answered C, we're going to provide you with some guidance about those key questions to help you get started right now. So I am going to turn it over to Autumn, and she's going to talk a little bit about the things you need to think about in order to get started. Autumn?
Thank you. There's so many things to think about, but I encourage you to dream big. I'm not sure exactly how the saying goes, but dream big, because your dreams become thoughts, your thoughts become actions, your actions become reality, and just as Bristol shared, they started out with a wish list, and I think that's really good advice. Let's dig in a little more to make sure that you feel confident that you've answered the key questions before moving forward. On this slide, you can see many questions that you need to ask yourself initially. A lot of these Bristol asked themselves, but what is the impact? The MTW plan for the year, what do we want? What waivers do we want? Who do we want to serve? What units do we want to impact? What are our short-term goals, our long-term goals? Do we want to do HQSs more often or less often? What do I need to do to create my impact analysis? Do I want any safe harbor or agency-specific waivers? How will this impact my families? What statutory objectives are you trying to meet? And what are the cost implications? Sorry. So really, what problems are you trying to solve? I encourage you to get a whiteboard or tell everybody on your team to make notes and ideas and wishes and put them all together. Bristol shared that they had to think through their software. They had to think through their financials. Community engagement and buy-in was really important to them. They chose to pick low-hanging fruit. Think about what's going to benefit your staff. What administrative burdens can you remove? What do you want to do for your families? How can you make them become more successful on your program and maybe graduate and go on to do other things? How are you going to serve your homeless and your disabled populations? How are you going to work with your nonprofits and your local community? And so Bristol also shared that they talked to their peers. I love the roller coaster. You're not alone. She said, we're all in this together, and that's so true. So, these are just some recommendation questions. I'm sure you'll come up with many more that you'll need to ask. So next slide. Okay, thinking about what you need to get started. As a reminder, the MTW supplement is essentially the repository of all your good thinking, all of your thoughts, all of your dreams. And it talks about what you want to do with your MTW designation. Why did you apply for it in the first place? You might have thought it could help with this or that, and then as you go along, it opens the doors for so many other things to problem solve for your agency and your families. So to begin with, you want to collaborate with your community and your interested parties to set your goals. What are your goals? Identify your desired outcomes. More on public engagement in a few moments. We'll get into that. You'll identify your activities that will result in the desired effect or impact, and consider the waivers you need to implement these activities. So once you've done your brainstorming and your wish list and what we want to solve for, then you can go to the Appendix 1 of the MTW operations and see out of those 17 waivers and 70 activities, what kind of matches, what will solve those problems that you want that you're experiencing. All right, next slide. Okay, thinking about what you need to get started. I think this isn't difficult or complicated. It's simply making sure that you think about these things during your planning so that you feel really well prepared to move forward. This is a great comprehensive list. When thinking about what you need to get started, this is the list of questions you may need to consider to translate what you want into the MTW supplement. What impacts do you want to achieve? What do you want to achieve? What do you want to put in your first MTW plan? What do you want to put in your future? Like, you can even do a 5-year plan. We're going to start out small and we're going to build our confidence, and then we're going to build on the next year and the next year. And you can, go to your menu of activities and just do a couple every year until you feel really good about what you've put in place. And then you can think big and really go outside the box. And how do you want to partner with your nonprofits, with your developers? Just amazing things that you can do with MTW and your flexibility and your fungibility. What waivers do you desire? What objectives are you going to meet? What are the cost I said this wrong before, implications? Is it going to save us money so that we can serve more families in another area, like local non-traditional? Is it going to cost us more money, but we know that there's a benefit to our families and we're okay with that? What households do you want to serve? Do you want to do just new admissions, existing families, different populations? How frequently do you want to do your re-exams? How will you handle the changes in income? It's different circumstances, recertification schedules. I'm just throwing a whole bunch of things out there. Do you need an impact analysis? Do you need a hardship policy? And I just got overwhelmed naming all of those things in the list that you need. We're all overwhelmed together and we're here for each other. I thought it was really good that Bristol kind of depends on their peers. I know in Colorado, the MTW agencies get together, often to talk about, what they're doing, and they're sharing their ideas. They reach out to the 39 agencies, and that is a really, really great resource. Your field office is a great resource. Your desk officer in the MTW office is a great resource. So I know this is overwhelming, and we're going to go more in detail on how to do some of these things. So this is really high level. If you're feeling a little anxiety, just take a deep breath and, talk to somebody, and you're likely somebody's already been through what you're going through. Okay, next slide. Okay, public engagement. I'm going to spend some time on this because it's so important. For your MTW effort to be successful, you're really going to want to focus on engaging your families and your community in the public process. The engagement will be woven throughout the MTW process. It requires really a comprehensive strategy. You know that getting residents to engage can be challenging. You want to foster more extensive involvement than you have up to this point, or you want to build on what you've already created, your relationships. So you want to build that buy-in, like Bristol said, and gain your local support. Consider involving the residents, your staff. Your staff is a great place to start. Your board, what does your board think? What do they want to see? It's kind of exciting to dream big, to think big, and to problem solve. It's really a puzzle that you can, really get good at. You want to talk to your partner agencies, your nonprofits, your developers, talk to your HUD field office. So you want to get all of these interested parties together and think and hear from them. So maybe you want to do it individually by category, or you want to have a big meeting and hear from everybody. Agencies that have experienced implementing MTW really emphasize that involving residents and getting their insight and buy-in is absolutely critical to the success of your MTW program. It's valuable to bring interested parties into the initial discussions, not just later, but in helping you put together your MTW supplement. Have discussions and plans, and as well as involving them in the implementation. So in each step, involve your parties, your families, your staff, your community, than just publishing the paper and hoping people will show up. And what I mean by that is I've worked at a housing authority before, and I know we all put our public hearings in the paper, and we just cross our fingers and we hope somebody will show up. Well, the MTW process is different, and it really requires more than just publishing in the paper and hoping people will show up. You need to take the extra steps like Bristol did, having a monthly meeting, sharing topics. If they can do it during COVID, it is absolutely possible to get people to engage, and you really want to listen to what they have to say. So there are some strategies that will help you do this. Establish trust early and often. Really begin engagement efforts with an honest assessment of where your agency is currently in terms of the relationship and reputation you have in the community. Be really clear and transparent. Be inclusive. Follow through on what you're going to say you're going to do. When you hit a bump in the road, and you will be honest about it and share what you'll do to address it. Educate the interested parties. Agencies are required to involve the residents by providing opportunities to review and comment on the MTW supplement. You want to go through participation with your resident advisory board. That's imperative. You want to get your resident advisory board together, and not just once a year, not just when you publish it, but throughout the year, and hear what they have to say. Be sure to build on the successes that you've had and learn from your pitfalls that you're encountering along the way. The relationships and skills you've built over time will help you effectively engage your community in the MTW program. Come prepared. Carefully consider how to structure the meeting to cover key topics in ways that convey information clearly and encourage a range of people to contribute to the ideas. Provide the meeting with goal and context, share information, answer their questions. Most importantly, listen to their suggestions and to their concerns, and be clear about how the agency is going to respond to that input. So one of the requirements, is the public engagement, the resident advisory board, the public hearings. You have to take down what their concerns are, what their questions were, and you have to show us how you responded to their input. I just got a supplement submitted for one of my PHAs, and they put together a PowerPoint. Some of the slides that we've used to do training, and it was fabulous. It was really clear and easy to understand. It addressed all the important information. So shout out to my PHA if you're on here. Carefully consider being inclusive and inviting diverse groups. You want everybody's voice at the table. You don't want to do anything without them, right? Be proactive about welcoming all the different voices and conversations. Think through removing barriers, physical barriers, communication barriers. I would say COVID was a barrier, but they did it. Think about removing cultural and language barriers. Remove those barriers and think about things differently. Think about work hours. Think about childcare. Think about transportation. What can you do to get everybody at the table so they have a voice? The public engagement, when it's done right, is an amazing process. You need all 4 of the steps in the graph: establishing trust, education, being inclusive, coming prepared. The MTW Expansion Online Training Manual has all of this helpful information that I just went over about engaging staff and residents and community. And we'll talk about that actually more in depth at the next webinar that we have. And before I go to the next slide, does anybody have any questions about that? I kind of went through it quickly. Okay. You'll have questions later. We're all here for you. Let's go to the next slide, please. Okay. It's really important to be strategic. The MTW supplement will lay out your plan and summarize all of this brainstorming and all of these great ideas and all of these dreams. You think big, and then you translate it to the MTW supplement. There's a thought process you are going to want to go through as you prepare to complete the supplement. Figure out what you want to do. What is your end game? What are your goals? What are you trying to achieve? Identify the activities that you're going to want to use to accomplish those goals. There isn't a need to select all the activities at once. We've said this again, really be strategic about what you want to implement at first. Say you want to implement some really big things, but I talked to somebody today who's thinking about software and HIP, and if we implement the HQS stuff, how is that going to affect that? So they're going to wait till some of the wrinkles are straightened out, and then they're going to implement those. Figure out what waivers you need, and then plug those into the MTW document. I liked that Bristol, they created a Word document, and then they copy and paste into the supplement. That's a really good process or best practice. Figure out what waivers you need, plug them in. Remember, you can use the PDF version also, not just so when you copy and paste into the supplement, the PDF version with the appropriate supporting documents, and we've talked about some of those, your impact analysis, your hardship policy, your special waivers, your certificate of compliance. So use the PDF version, use all the supporting documents as a tool to communicate to the public when you're engaging them at the public hearings. Use that document to share what you're doing. Some helpful tips to keep in mind. Really think carefully about what you're trying to achieve and tailor your waivers accordingly, the waivers that you're going to be requesting. Don't let the MTW waivers list of the operations notice limit your thinking. Think outside the box. Reading through them and picking the ones that sound good, or picking waivers other agencies have implemented, may be the right choice for you and may not be the right choice for you. However, the MTW waivers are apps. The Appendix 1 is the quickest and easiest to use. Although you can request safe harbor waivers and agency-specific waivers, you don't have to do them all to achieve your vision. We do not recommend in the first year while you're getting up to speed in the MTW world. Start out small. Start with some easy activities. We've talked about the low-hanging fruit. Build that credibility and trust. Practice managing the change slowly. Change is hard for everybody, so do it methodically. Learn how the process works. What does it look like when you submit a supplement? How long does it take to get approval? Learn how the process works. Plan to build in more complex activities over time. This is not a marathon. It's not a sprint. Oh, no, wait, it is a marathon. It's not a sprint. Remember the word to the wise. We've shared from other cohorts, you do not have to choose all the waivers. They're just there as a menu. But all of the waivers that you want to implement at one time, not all of them. And believe me, we've seen some PHAs that have done that, and I'm thinking about them. Yes. Choose just selected few waivers that are realistic to implement the first year in the supplement, and you can add the additional waivers in the coming years. But don't stop dreaming. Don't stop thinking big. Don't stop being creative. That's what's so cool about MTW. So this is just an overview, and we'll dig deeper into the next webinar. So you want to identify your desired outcome, identify activities that will result in the desired outcome, consider the waivers you want to use to implement, and then complete your MTW supplement. You can do it in use the PDF, use the Word version, and then upload it to the system. And there you go. We will review, and the field office and the MTW office will review, and you will get your approval. You will implement, or you'll include all those waivers in your admin plan and ACOP, and then you can implement. And I'm really excited for all of you that you have joined us. Remember, we're all in this together, and we can do it. So thank you. Andalyn, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you so much, Autumn. Really a lot of great information today. I know that you guys received a lot of information. Want to make sure that we do get a chance to answer any questions. I don't see any questions in the chat right now, but if you have any questions, either for Lisa and Diana or for about anything that we've discussed today, please, it's not too late to put that in the chat or simply unmute yourself and ask your question verbally. So give it just a minute in case anybody wants to unmute.
Andalyn, this is Lisa. It's not a question, but as Autumn was talking, it reminded me that Diana got me trained so that any and every agenda we did for any kind of meeting during the year, MTW is to always be on the agenda. And we do that all the time, all year, even board meetings. We talk about where we are, where we might want to go for the next supplement. It's a constant conversation.
That's wonderful. Yep. And a part of that constant conversation is a really good way to frame it, the public engagement or the engagement process, and keeping everybody in the know of what's going on and getting feedback. So thank you so much. All right, we've done this before, and I'm going to go through a few of the resources now, but please don't hesitate to put your questions into chat if you think of any, or come off mute and just interrupt me while I go through these resources. Want to make sure that you get any questions answered. So next slide, please. There have been a lot of really great resources kind of sprinkled throughout the slides today, and we have aggregated those all along with some other helpful resources on the last 2 slides here. And everybody who registered should have received this via email this morning. So as always, the welcome letter timeline and the resources that were sent to you via email from the MTW office should be kept handy and refer back to those often. The MTW selection notice is very specific to your cohort, so that's a really important document. I know Crystal stressed this earlier, but cannot stress it enough. The MTW operations notice is simply your guiding document and should be referred to really, really often. The MTW work page on HUD.gov has a lot of great information. There's also an MTW expansion page on HUD.gov. That has great information for the expansion agencies. There's an MTW expansion online training manual. This is an interactive training manual on the HUD Exchange that's really helpful and kind of walks you through every step, and has some quizzes in there and fun things to make sure that you understand. The MTW expansion webinars. So these webinars that we're holding now, as well as all of the other webinars from the other onboarding of the cohorts, are all right there in one place, so you can watch the webinars and refer back to them. Again, the operations notice, program administration and oversight, talks about just that, and we've kind of linked that link right directly back to that section so that you can easily get to it. There's the MTW supplement web-based form system. So this is a demo that's going to walk you through. So be sure to watch that when you're ready to go ahead and complete your MTW supplement. Watch that demo kind of before you get started. Completing the supplement, there's a whole reference guide that really will walk you through as well. So trying to break down that supplement and make sure that you have all the information that you need. There's also a reference guide. And as Crystal mentioned this earlier too, the HIP system training is very important as well. Next slide. And then there's a whole page of MTW supplements with forms, instructions, guidance. This is going to link you right back there, really important as well. Section 4 of the MTW operations notice talks about waivers. There's also in the online manual, that interactive manual that I mentioned earlier on the HUD Exchange, there's types of waivers and their requirements. So a whole section that's going to really give you the information that you need about waivers. Appendix 1 of the operations notice also refers back to the waiver. And Appendix 2, which is also listed here, refers to requirements for safe harbors. So that's where you'll find that information. There's also impact analysis training and hardship policy training and slides. So lots of really great resources here, and we hope that those will be helpful to you. It's about 3:57. Does anyone have any other questions? Anybody want to come off mute? All right. Well, then we hope that this has been really helpful to you all. We look forward to, next slide, please, seeing you at our upcoming training. So as I mentioned earlier, July 25th is going to take this training a step further and really go into how to submit your first supplement. Then we'll have office hours, so open time for everyone to ask questions and have a hopefully robust discussion around what needs to be done. And then the 50058 MTW expansion form changes webinar is in September. So in the meantime, between now and the next webinar or the office hours, don't hesitate to go ahead and ask any questions if you need to via the MTW email address at mtwflexibility2@hud.gov. We thank you all for joining us here today and hope you have a great afternoon.